Hello and welcome to this descriptive video of the Iowa Watershed Approach project. My name is Larry Weber, a faculty member at the University of Iowa and research engineer at the Iowa Flood Center. I wanted to provide a bit of an overview of our Iowa Watershed Approach project that's now in its fifth and final year. As we approach this final year, we're really excited about the progress that we've made throughout Iowa, working in 8 rural watersheds and 3 urban communities to improve flood damage reduction and water quality across the state of Iowa. This exciting program has led to over 800 conservation practices built throughout the watersheds that we work in, and this work has been led by a wide team of experts across the state. We're very appreciative of all of the watershed management authorities that have helped to advance our program. The hard work of the WMA leadership, inspired by the work of watershed coordinators that work throughout the watershed to make the watersheds a better place each and every day. We're very thankful for the landowners that have volunteered to step forward and adopt and accept practices from the Iowa Watershed Approach project. Through this activity, we have built over 800 practices, farm ponds, wetlands, terraces to manage sediment in those watersheds and ensure the long-term viability of those practices, each one providing a small benefit to flood damage reduction during heavy rainfall, and each one of them providing a water quality benefit throughout the year. We're very excited as we enter into our 5th and final year to bring this project to close. The project, in addition to constructing the practices throughout the watershed, also provides a template for Iowa. In addition, by establishing a watershed management authority, we have created a local governance structure to do integrated water resources management well into the future. We've also provided a watershed plan that will serve as a template for each of the watersheds over the next 25 years. The practices that we've installed provide an example of how we can improve our watershed and give the watershed management authorities the experience in going out and working with voluntary landowners, contractors, technicians, and watershed coordinators to get practices built all throughout the watershed. Lastly, the hydrologic assessments and quantification of benefit that the Iowa Flood Center will provide will serve as the necessary detail for how these practices improve our flooding and water quality throughout the state. So the comprehensive plan that we've developed in Iowa through the Iowa Watershed Approach project serves as a template for Iowa as well as across the Midwest and the nation. We're very excited about the accomplishments of the program and very thankful to all who have participated. Most certainly the watershed management authorities, their leadership, the watershed coordinators, our funded and leveraged partners, the voluntary landowners that have stepped forward to accept the practices, and all of those who have engaged in the watershed planning process throughout the Iowa Watershed Approach project. I'll say thank you.
My name is Ross Evelsizer. I'm one of the watershed coordinators with the Upper Wapsi Watershed Management Authority, and we're just going to take a look at a few projects that are part of the Iowa Watershed Approach project, which is a statewide project that started here in Iowa a few years ago to help build resiliency across 9 watersheds in the state. So the state received about $96 million to work on these projects, and that went for planning, hydrologic modeling, and then implementation. And so the projects that we're going to look at today are going to be some of those projects that were implemented through these dollars. So we're partnering with the Upper Wapsi Watershed Management Authority, and that was a group that formed in 2014 with the goal of restoring flood resilience to the Wapsi watershed as well as improving water quality. And that group is made up of communities and soil and water districts and county boards of supervisors, and there's 32 board members on that group. So we know that there's many ways that we can handle trying to mitigate flooding, and the best projects or the most effective projects seem to be those that we can put in the upper parts of the watershed. And so the project behind me, you can see, is one of many that we're going to put in. I believe there's 28 actually that will be installed as part of this project. And the goal there is to put a network of distributed storage out on the landscape that will help collect heavy rainflow events and keep those out of the streams and rivers during, right after a heavy rainfall. And eventually that water will be allowed to drain out to the river as it would normally, but do so in a way that's not going to cause flash flooding.
My name is Tori Nimrod. I'm the other Upper Wapsi Watershed Project Coordinator. And throughout the watershed, there are, like Ross said, 28 different projects that are going to be implemented. They range from detention ponds, wetlands, oxbow restorations, grass waterways, and wascob structures. And then of those 28, this is one of them. This is a Quasquiton Wetland project. It drains about 10 acres of upland land, and it all collects down at the bottom of this pond, which holds about 6 feet of water when it's full. That really helps flooding benefits because during heavy rainfalls, as it's like 6 to 7 inches or even less, this pond will fill up, and then that holds back those flash flows, so it reduces the impact on the downstream landowners and kind of reduces the flash flooding effect that often Quasquiton has problems with. So a lot of those projects, the other 28, do similar things. They all are focused on reducing flash flows and holding back water up in the watershed, so that way I guess it just lowers flooding. This project was constructed this summer, so it was actually completed earlier this summer when we had very wet weather, and so when they were trying to plant it was very swampy, and so they did plant it to some natives, but right now you see a lot of just volunteer grasses that have come up, but over time those natives will eventually establish and the weeds will go down with some management from the city. They'll continue to mow it in the coming years, and after a couple of years more natives will come up, so it'll look more like that natural wetland look that you're used to seeing. So this project will have a lot of wildlife benefits, so pollinators, once the plants get established and they start flowering, they will be a benefit to pollinators, which include bees, monarch butterflies, birds, and various other pollinators. It also provides habitat for nesting birds as well with the tall grass, and also a water source for the wildlife as well. There are also water quality benefits to this wetland, as most wetlands. As water flows down, the sediment will collect in the basin, and so that way if it has time to filter down, as well as other nutrients like nitrates and things like that. Once that water is held back, the nutrients will have time to settle and collect in the basin before that water then is released downstream. So landowners can get involved right now. This project, our implementation dollars for the Upper Wapsi IWA project are estimated to be spent, and all of these 28 projects have to be implemented by next December 2021. And so, but as a landowner right now, you can always talk to your local SWCD offices and NRCS offices and get involved with implementing any water quality or flood reduction practices. A lot of the time, the water quality practices also do have flood benefits, reduction benefits as well.
I'm Chad Staten. I'm the mayor of Quasquiton. We have a town of 554 here that we settle along the banks of the Wapsi. Over the last many years, we've had many problems with flooding and flash flooding in town. The whole town drains about 30 to 60 acres of ground. This project here, we drain about 10 acres into it. And we decided to do this project on this site to try and mitigate flooding downstream. The city's role in this is we helped establish and work with the county to secure the site, and we are going to be maintaining it here on out, as far as mowing it and making sure everything stays native the way we want it to. We installed it this summer and they did all the stuff, and when they went to plant it, it was very wet, and then all of a sudden it hit a drought. So we don't know how much of the seed took on, but we're hoping if we have to reseed it, we will, and it'll be nice and green with a lot of native plants. The local residents are beneficial in this, and we have not heard any complaints since we put this in. It used to wash out the ditches and driveways and downstream, and we had a lot of gully washers, but we've had 2 major storms this summer, and it has held back and released slowly the way it was planned to, and we have not had any of that this year.
So here we have another detention project that was implemented through the Iowa Watershed Approach project. And you know, this project doesn't, you know, is sort of like the last project in Quasquiton. It doesn't look like it's holding a lot of water, and really that's by design. The less water that's in there means that there's more room for storage capacity. This particular project drains about 6 acres. And while that doesn't sound like much, it's 96% effective in reducing flow in a 100-year rainfall event. So you can imagine by putting these out all over the landscape, you're basically stopping rainfall from you know, a number of different places that normally would be contributing a lot of water that would then lead to flooding for the Wapsi River. This particular project was done with a private landowner, as are most of the projects that were done through this project. Landowners in the Upper Wapsi were able to get 90% cost share in implementing, so that's a really good deal. And we were able to then, you know, sell those projects to landowners that much better because we had that 90% cost share, and we're able to get really high participation for the project, and we're going to be able to spend all the implementation dollars in this watershed. So final steps to finish up this project will really just be to seed it down this fall, and you know, with a good native mix that will benefit pollinators and wildlife. And otherwise, you know, this is really about the finished project. So once all of these projects are complete and final designs are in, we're going to be able to send that information along with Shive Hattery, who is our engineering firm that's helping us with the project, down to the Iowa Flood Center. And they're going to use that information then to model and tell us exactly how much the agglomerated impact of all of these projects is going to have actually on flooding in the Upper Wapsi. So overall, by doing all these projects in conjunction with other conservation projects, that's, you know, really just the first step for the Upper Wapsi WMA in implementing their plan and moving forward towards a more resilient watershed and improving water quality.
Hi, my name is John Rathbun. I'm the Clear Creek Watershed Project Coordinator. I work for the Clear Creek Watershed Coalition, which is a WMA located in Iowa County and Johnson County, Iowa. The watershed starts above Williamsburg, which most people know because of the outlet mall, but actually starts in a town called Conroy, which is north of Williamsburg. And it runs from Iowa County down through Oxford, Iowa, through Tiffin, Iowa, and empties into the Iowa River at Coralville. The governmental parts of the organization are, starting from the upper end, would be Iowa County, the Iowa County Soil and Water Conservation District, Johnson County, the Johnson County Soil and Water Conservation District, the cities of Oxford, Tiffin, North Liberty, Coralville, and Iowa City. The goals of the project are a couple, one of which is to increase awareness about the watershed in general, also improve the watershed. We're also currently looking at reducing flood impacts downstream and water quality as well. We're currently a part of the Iowa Watershed Approach. That's the funding that came through to Iowa back in 2016, I believe, and we were selected as one of the participating watersheds. Our watershed is about 66,000 acres. Like I said before, runs from Iowa County into Johnson County to Coralville. So we're at the Roseanne Sippy property, which is north of Oxford, and I was asked how these sites were selected. Major factor in the Iowa Watershed Approach project is that everything is voluntary, so participation is voluntary and projects or practices are voluntary as well. We met with the SIPPs back at nearly the beginning, actually at the beginning of the project. I think Pat and David and Byrne were one of my first visits. And we selected, they showed me 4 different sites that they wanted to do work on, and all 4 of them were ponds. The sites we went through evaluation, and they're all feasible for ponds, and so that went to the design process. When we were meeting out here with the engineer and the SIPPs, we looked at the site where we're going to have the Fringe Wetland, and as we were talking through what could go on at that site, we talked about a pond being first and foremost as a priority. And then we also talked about possibly doing a wetland in the upper reaches of that pond. In the course of wetland investigations, we discovered that there were some wetlands that would be impacted by the pond project, and the engineer, remembering that the SIPPs had mentioned an interest in wetlands, they decided to do the mitigation as a fringe wetland around the outside of the pond, in actually probably 90% of the pond's perimeter is going to have a fringe wetland. And you might be asking what a fringe wetland is. The easiest way to say that is it would be along the fringe of a pond, but this one is a shelf varying from probably 6 feet to 10 or 12, maybe 18 feet in some portions. And that's going to be situated so that that shelf is just above the normal pool of the pond. So the soil in that shelf will be saturated most of the time and will be inundated during rain events. So it'll rise up and submerge the plants that are in that fringe wetland, and then drop down over the course of the next few days as the level drains down. There is a water quality benefit of the pond and the wetland too. The water, as it comes into the pond from the upper reaches, which isn't that far away, there's actually a spring there that Pat might talk about. The spring was used for a wagon stop at one point in time back in the 1800s. That's our main source of water, but as the water comes down into the pond from the sides, it'll go through that wetland and be filtered as well. Plus there's added benefit of some, I think, nitrate removal from the wetland as the water drains down, and when the plants are uptaking nitrogen through the dry periods as well. So I mentioned before that the SIPPs have 4 practices that we're going to be installing. We have 2 that are already installed east of here a little bit, and then this one, and then the one with the fringe wetland. The fringe wetland is the pond with the largest surface area, and one of the main goal of the Iowa Watershed Approach is to help reduce flooding, and we do that between the normal pool level and the difference between that and the spillway level, and that's measured in acre feet. The best way I've come to try and figure out what an acre foot looks like is if you go down to the local high school football field and you put a foot of water on it, and that practice on the other side of the road, the one with the fringe wetland, is going to hold about 8 1/4 acre feet after each rainstorm, if there's enough rain to fill that much. And all totaled, the SIPPs just by themselves in their little part of the world here, over any rain event, will be holding 14.2 acre feet. So that's 14 football fields an acre or a foot deep in water. They'll be holding up in the watershed and allowing that to come out slowly over the course of the next few days. In total, we're going to be installing 70 different practices throughout the watershed, and I estimate that it's going to be roughly 65 acre feet that'll be held back up in the watershed after any rain event of significance.
Hi, I'm Pat Sippy. This is my brother.
Burn Sippy.
We originally heard about this, the Clear Creek Watershed Project through the NRCS and had a chance to meet John, the coordinator. We went to a series of meetings about the effects of flooding, which were quite interesting and gave us lots to think about and aspects of flooding that we hadn't considered before. This pond in particular was an existing pond. It was built in the late or early 50s by my dad and uncle. It had outlived its useful life. It was quite silted in. You know, obviously farming practices have changed in 70 years. And we had talked about, you know, what we were going to do with this pond, and the watershed project came up, and so we were happy to get involved. It gave us a way to deal with the erosion that was happening here from the old spillway. It's given us a way to move forward with this and hold back water, considerably more water than it had been before. So we're thrilled to be able to participate.
Yes, we have been interested in conservation practices, especially our parents, my father, Francis, our father, Francis, and Roseanne, his wife, and we had started a forest on the other side of our farm, and had started a prairie, and that was years ago in the 1990s, and those are doing quite well. And then we had slowly added more prairie to the farm as we lessened our cattle herd, and we finally got out of the cattle herd, and we are have a lot of prairie practices. And so this is kind of involved with the Conservation Reserve Program in that it gives us the high quality water that will flow into this this pond and help with flood control.
You know, flood control is, I think, an added benefit for us, one we hadn't certainly given much thought to previously, how it affects, we're on some of the highest ground in Johnson County here and really don't think about what flooding does to Coralville and Iowa City. You know, our folks, my mom is 91, she's still here at the farm, and they've always been interested in good conservation practices and have passed that on to us. The erosion control is probably what came to our mind first rather than flood control, but after these series of meetings, I can see how they both mesh together. It's a win-win.
The prairie practices are here have increased the wildlife a lot on our farm. We see deer and wild turkey and you know, hawks and owls and obviously rodents of all kinds and pheasants, and so that having access to water will help even more with the animals that are, you know, it helps nature, it helps us have a good practice here.
The majority of the farm is now in CRP. We at this point do not have any row crops. We are still making hay. You know, what happens with the CRP program will determine where we go in the future. This ground is eligible for CRP because it was cropland. You know, we have put in the tree practice. We have put in some pollinator. We've put in some of the mixed short and tall grass prairies for the safe acres, gaining ground for wildlife. We've kind of looked at the programs as they have become available, and you know, wetlands is kind of a hot topic lately. So having this fringe wetland at the pond over to the west is going to be an experience for us. I mean, we're looking forward to that. There aren't a lot of wetlands left in Iowa, and over there it's kind of a unique situation, I think, with there is a spring that comes down from our neighbors. That water pretty much flows through there. It's not big, but water flows through there year round. Maybe not quite so much now because it's so dry, but it'll just be an enhancement over there, and something we weren't originally expecting because we didn't think there was wetland over there. So that was kind of a surprise, but in the end, it'll be a good surprise.
Oh, we do have some neighbors and friends that will hunt, obviously hunting for deer, and we have pheasant hunters and some turkey hunters, and so you know, during the times when that's available, yeah, they will ask and do some hunting out on the various lands. We get people to stop by and always want to. They see that big pollinator in the background or that shortgrass prairie behind us, and they're interested. So there is definitely lots of wildlife, and they're interested in hunting.
You know, when we had a cow-calf herd, and did that for many, many, many years, so the row crops was always sort of a rotation of, hay, pasture, row crop. As we, our goals, rather changed, and the herd was reduced. Now we did have some tenants in here cropping ground. We certainly looked at the CRP programs as they became available, not probably as financially advantageous to be in CRP, but for us, I think we were happier putting it in the natives and doing the tree planting on what is some very hilly ground. And I think that we're going to leave this farm better. What happens in the future will depend on what happens with CRP. But yeah, we would like to keep it in grasses and forbs if we are able.
Pat mentioned that this is hilly ground, and we did have row crops here, though. That field behind us, the pollinator, is actually a very good field. It has a good CSR rating, and it for years was going into corn, soybeans, and then into alfalfa. We would rotate around that. But some of these other fields are a little more hilly, and they're mostly for cow pasture, but farmers do put those into corn or beans when they need to, or at least the tops of those. And so getting away from that practice, that creates a lot of erosion when you're going into fields that are a little too hilly. And that's the thing we like to see other farmers take out, when they get a chance, take out something and use it for conservation. And some of our neighbors have done that, and that's really nice to see. There are fields that are better suited for corn and row crops, and then fields that aren't, that could do better with a conservation practice or some other practice. So it's nice to see. We felt it was important to move towards conservation, and yeah, like Pat said, it's not always as financially advantageous, but it's something our parents really thought was important, and we do too.
My name is Matt Frana, a project coordinator for the Upper Iowa Watershed Management Authority. The Upper Iowa Watershed Management Authority is made up of city and county organizations that are in the Upper Iowa Watershed. So we got people from county supervisors, city officials. We also got Soil and Water Conservation District representatives that they all come together to meet and talk about issues within the Upper Iowa Watershed and ways to, I guess, combat these issues. So the main goals of the organization are to reduce flooding in the Upper Iowa Watershed through doing projects like this where we can store water up in the landscape and slow water after heavy rain events going down to the river and causing flood damage. Other goals that go along with this also are improving water quality by reducing sedimentation into the river, and just making the river cleaner through nutrient reduction and pollutant reduction. The reason why we chose this site is the landowner actually had heard about the project and contacted me to see if there was potential to do anything out here. We came out, took a look at the site. One of the things we really got to be aware of, being northeast Iowa with karst topography, is depth to bedrock, quality soils to build with, and so we went and checked that all out. And this looked like a pretty ideal spot for a pond type structure like the landowner was looking for. So we continue to pursue planning on it, and I guess that's where we're at today with it. So these practices work to meet the project goals in flood reduction, because we're controlling with this project. We'll be controlling about 175 acres of watershed. After a 10-year rain event, which is 4.5 inches in 24 hours, we'll have a 90% reduction in stream flow, and then up to a 50-year rain event, which would be 6.5 inches in 24 hours, we would have a 70% reduction in stream flow. So, like I had mentioned, the main project goals are to reduce stream flow into the upper Iowa and help prevent flooding. So this project here will actually control 175 acres of the watershed. In addition to the flood reduction benefits, it will also control sediment coming down through here, so it'll be less sediment going down into the streams. So additional wildlife benefits would be, it'll be a good spot for ducks, migrating birds coming through to stop at. There's not any of that right in this area. It'll also probably support fish for the landowner, I guess more of a recreational opportunity for him. We're also going to be adding some native prairie to some of the disturbed areas outside the pool area, which that'll enhance wildlife habitat for insects and pollinators and other birds, I guess. We got several more of these pond type projects going in. Also, in addition, with this site, we're also putting a sediment basin up the valley a little bit further and redoing the waterway. And so that'll help control sediment going into this structure and help the longevity of it. We're also working with the county to find spots where there's roads that have dips in the gravel roads, where we can actually build up those roads and modify the culverts to hold water behind those roads. And so I'm pretty excited about getting some of those projects in. We're looking to get some of them bid yet this fall and then start construction on them next spring when conditions are right.
I'm Tom Beard.
And I'm Marin Beard. We're at Luna Valley Farm in Decorah, Iowa.
We're in a sub-watershed of the Upper Iowa River, and we have Canoe Creek flowing through our farm. And with increased rainfall events, we were seeing more flooding in our neighborhood. And that was affecting the productivity of parts of our farm, and also was causing damage on our farm and for neighbors downstream. So we're kind of caught our attention that they were doing projects to help deal with some of that stuff. It was recently completed, so we haven't had any really big rainfall events since, but it's designed to slow down runoff, which is the main thing, so it'll, keep water on our farm longer and just prevent flooding, hopefully.
I think it's been a great process. We tell everyone we know how wonderful Matt was to work with. So detail oriented and just really on top of things and great at communicating the whole time. And we had to work with our neighbor. Ours was really complicated because we had an easement we had to do because part of it's going to pool on his farm if it rains a lot. So we had to really work through a lot of those details and legal details. And Matt was persistent and helped get us through it. And the bid process was really interesting, and the contractors did a fabulous job really respecting our property when they were here. And we're really happy overall with the way things turned out and the way that things went throughout the whole project time.
My name's Adam Rodenberg. I'm the project coordinator for the Middle Cedar Watershed. It's part of the Iowa Watershed Approach project. We are here at the Wolfgram Wetland site in rural Tama County, approximately 6 miles west of the city of Traer. This wetland treats about 1,100 acres of upstream watershed mostly row crop acres, and has a pool area of about 8 acres once it is filled up. As of right now, we just completed this project about a week ago, so there isn't water in it yet, but we'll be working on filling it up by next spring. This site does not have any special habitats around the pool area. On the downstream side of this wetland, we had stream mitigation requirements as part of the Army Corps of Engineers permit, which incorporates about an 1/8 mile buffer and stream bank stabilization project. This site was built on a cattle pasture, an old farmstead property that is still intended to be grazed, and so we incorporated a lot of cattle fencing to keep cows out of the wetland and prevent them from getting injured or dying, getting stuck in the mud, those sorts of things. So the landowner is still able to graze cows in and around this site while protecting the wetland itself. Again, as part of the Iowa Watershed Approach, our main focus is flood reduction, and so this wetland follows a CREP design standard similar to the Jellison site, where we were trying to reduce the risk of flooding downstream. And so we were able to work with the adjacent landowner on this site to get a temporary easement to back water up during flood events, and then during normal flow, just a small portion of water would back up onto their land as well. So right behind me is a water control structure. Inside this tube is our stop logs, which you can control the water level for the wetland behind me. The main purpose of that is, one, to control water and help maintain the structure long term, and then also if there's any habitat manipulation or any sediment that needs to be removed over time, the landowner will have that ability to do so. It's very common with these types of wetland projects as far as a design feature. So this site was highly unique as the landowner that owns the property attempted to build a dam here approximately 30 years ago on his own. You can actually see it if you look at LiDAR imagery and aerial photography in the past. And so they had the right concept of what they wanted to do, but the magnitude of what they needed to do was a lot smaller. So when this project came along, they were very eager and excited to participate in this project. Again, similar to like the other site, we were able to acquire some additional outside funds to help cover landowner portion of the project. The Nature Conservancy and the Iowa Department of Agricultural and Land Stewardship all contributed funds to build this project. And then the landowner on a voluntary basis gave up a certain portion of her farm for, one, the pool and the buffer area below the embankment. And the purpose of these programs and these projects is for reducing flood risk downstream, but also improving water quality to the streams and downstream. The other site, similar to this site, where we had landowners that were very willing and eager to voluntarily participate in the project without receiving easement payments, which saved the project and the state a lot of money. And it's going to be very beneficial for everyone locally and then downstream as well. So both these projects have earthen embankments that are built to store water upstream. You are standing on one now. On the other site, at the Jellison site, it was under construction. Both embankments are roughly about 12 feet tall at the highest point and have a sheet pile spillway for normal flow to dissipate downstream. So when this site is filled, past that grouping of trees will be the top of the water line. It's very long and linear, and then when a flood of high magnitude reaches this site, water will actually almost get up to the gravel road about a half a mile away. This site is working right now. As soon as we have the embankment built, they essentially can function as a flood structure immediately after. So this site is fairly unique, as we had quite a few landowners in the immediate area participating. This is the largest structure in this drainage, this 1,100 acre drainage. Directly upstream from this site, we constructed a pond last year with the adjacent landowner, and then another landowner, we constructed a wetland just a little bit further upstream that all drained down through here. So when we do go back to model flood reduction with the University of Iowa, we should be able to simulate fairly good numbers as far as flow reduction and flood benefit for downstream landowners.
My name is Kara Morgan. I am with Golden Hills RC&D and the East and West Nishnabotna Watershed Management Coalition. The East and West Nishnabotna Watershed Management Coalition is a separate but sister management coalition that are both Huck 8 watersheds working together for a common goal. We have 11 counties that are involved. We have cities and soil and water conservation districts in all of those counties. They work together, and their two main focuses are water quality and to reduce flooding and flood resiliency. This particular project is a bank stabilization project. Being in western Iowa, we have deep loess soil, which is a highly erodible soil that tends to wash off and get into our river systems. So this bank stabilization is to help with the erosion of the soil along the river itself. This particular project is two landowners with multiple family members. One landowner is an absentee landowner that has her property leased out. So my job was basically to work with all of the different partners, including the engineering firm, and to be that liaison to bring this project together. These landowners have been wonderful to work with. They really do care about what their property is doing to the water, and this particular project will have a buffer strip, so improving the water quality is one main focus of this particular project. With that buffer, there will be habitat and forage. It'll be a natural prairie type buffer with the bank stabilization.
My name is Jake Miriovsky. I am the project manager with JEO Consulting Group. We've been working with Kara, the watershed coordinator, on these projects in the Nishnabotna watershed. This particular project is stabilizing approximately a half mile of riverbank that was severely eroded, contributing soil and nutrients to the river. So with this project, our design includes a combination of bendway weirs, peak toe protection, and bank shaping and a native grass buffer. So the bendway weirs and peak toe protection are meant to move the high velocity flows away from the bank. It actually promotes reestablishment of a floodplain bench that then can naturally vegetate. And it's a more natural form of bank stabilization. It's a technique that has proven to work well in eastern Nebraska, western Iowa. And as you can see behind me, the contractor is in the process of beginning to build the bendway weirs. And we're hoping to have this one wrapped up by approximately the end of the year. Yeah, one of the unique things with this site is that it is split between two landowners. So it's just great coordination between the watershed coordinator and the two landowners involved to get them both enrolled in the program and to be at the point we're at in construction. So a unique project in that aspect, one that we're really excited about getting completed.
I'm Roberta Overholzer. And this is my brother, Dale Evans.
Dale Evans.
And we own this property together.
We've owned it since 1998, so it's 22 years. I have farmed it since then, and my grandson has farmed it. He started like 6 years ago farming it, so he's the current tenant. Well, I watched this river erode for 20 years since we've owned it, and it was just a sickening feeling some years when this river would fill up, and we've had probably 3 floods in the last 20 years that have covered a good share of this 290 acres of crop ground, all but maybe 10 or 15 acres each time it flooded. And I watched the cuts come back in the rivers. Not only the river eroding the bank, it also ate back from runoff from the large 5-6 inch rains would create large cutbacks into the fields. So we had an opportunity to get government assistance with this, so we took advantage of it. We actually had started doing this on our own a couple of years ago. We had quite a little concrete stockpiled here on the bank, and we're going to do it privately.
And cheaply, privately and cheaply.
Yeah, but we were still about 25% short of the concrete. We had trouble acquiring enough concrete to finish the job, or to even start the jobs, and then this program came along and afforded us an opportunity to do the job at probably a much better job, but at less money.
We're just very thankful that this opportunity has come along, because it's just too much to handle for the landowner themselves. To be able to get assistance is wonderful, and we do thank you. Being able to have the engineers involved, the financial, the expertise, all of this wonderful help that know what they're doing, we're very pleased. We're very pleased.
Well, I hope this is a project that will last well past my lifetime. I'm sure it will. I've seen other projects that have done on this river that were just private projects, and one instance I saw was done probably 10, 15 years ago, and I'm seeing it starting to erode somewhat. But I'm looking for this one to be probably last longer than that. I mean, they need a little maintenance from time to time. I'm sure all of them do.
We are true believers of protecting the land. We want to be good stewards of the land, and this is one of the top priorities.